Okay, let's read Dr. Johnson's Rambler number 16 for Saturday, May 12th, 1750. The title of which is The Dangers and Miseries of Literary Eminence. This essay is a continuation of the essay earlier from responding to a young man's inquiries about becoming an author. It opens with a little Latin, which I'll attempt. Torrens dissenti copia multis, et sua mortifica est facundaia. Juvenal. Some, who the depths of eloquence have found, in that unnavigable stream, were drowned. Dryden. Here it begins. Sir, I am the modest young man whom you favored with your advice in a late paper, and, as I am very far from suspecting that you foresaw the numberless inconveniences which I have, by following it, brought upon myself, I will lay my condition open before you, for you seem bound to extricate me from the perplexities in which your counsel, however innocent in the intention, has contributed to involve me. You told me, as you thought, to my comfort, that a writer might easily find means of introducing his genius to the world, for the presses of England were open. This I have now fatally experienced. The press is, indeed, open. Facilis decentis Averni, noctus etqua dies patal atri janus titris. Virgil. The gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent, and easy is the way. Dryden. The means of doing hurt to ourselves are always at hand. I immediately set to the printer, and contracted with him for an impression of several thousands of my pamphlet. While it was at press, I was seldom absent from the printing house, and continually urged the workmen to haste, by solicitations, promises, and rewards. From the day, all other pleasures were excluded, by the delightful employment of correcting the sheets, and from the night sleep was generally banished, by anticipations of the happiness which every hour was bringing near. At last, the time of publication approached, and my heart beat with the raptures of an author. I was, above all, little precocious, and, in defiance of envy and of criticism, set my name upon the title, without sufficiently considering that what has once passed the press is irrevocable, and that though the printing house may properly be compared to the infernal regions, for the faculty of its entrance, and the difficulty with which its authors return from it, yet there is this difference, that the great genius can never return to his former state, by a happy draught of the waters of oblivion. I am now, Mr. Rambler, known to be an author, and am condemned, irreversibly condemned, to all the miseries of high reputation. The first morning after publication, my friends assembled about me. I presented each, as is usual, with a copy of my book. They looked into the first pages, but were hindered by their admiration from further reading. The first pages are, indeed, very elaborate. Some passages they particularly dwelt upon as more eminently beautiful than the rest, and some delicate strokes and secret elegances I pointed out to them, which had escaped their observation. I then begged of them to forbear their compliments, and invited them, I could do no less, to dine with me at a tavern. After dinner, the book was resumed, but their praises very often so much overpowered my modesty that I was forced to put about the glass, and had often no means of repressing the clamors of their admiration, but by thundering to the drawer for another bottle. Next morning, another set of my acquaintances congratulated me upon my performance with such importunity of praise that I was again forced to obviate their civilities by a treat. On the third day, I had yet a greater number of applauses to be put to silence in the same manner, and on the fourth, those whom I had entertained the first day came again, having in the perusal of the remaining part of the book discovered so many forceful sentences and masterly touches that it was impossible for me to bear the repetition of their commendations. I therefore persuaded them once more to adjourn to the tavern, and choose some other subject on which I might share in their conversation. But it was not in their power to withhold their attention from my performance, which had so entirely taken possession of their minds that no entreaties of mine could change their topic, and I was obliged to stifle with claret that praise which neither my modesty could hinder, nor my uneasiness repress. The whole week was thus spent in a kind of literary revel, and I have now found that nothing is so expensive as great abilities, unless there is joined with them an insatiable eagerness of praise. For to escape from the pain of hearing myself exalted above the greatest names, dead and living, of the learned world, it has already cost me 2 hogsheads of port, 15 gallons of arrack, 10 dozen of claret, and 45 bottles of champagne. I was resolved to stay at home no longer, and therefore rose early and went to the coffee house, but found I had now made myself too eminent for happiness, and that I was no longer to enjoy the pleasure of mixing upon equal terms with the rest of the world. As soon as I enter the room, I see part of the company raging with envy, which they endeavor to conceal, sometimes with the appearance of laughter, and sometimes with that of contempt. But the disguise is such that I can discover the secret rancor of their hearts, and as envy is deservedly its own punishment, I frequently indulge myself in tormenting them with my presence. But though there may be some slight satisfaction received from the mortification of my enemies, yet my benevolence will not suffice me to take any pleasure in the terrors of my friends. I have been cautious, since the appearance of my work, not to give myself more premeditated airs of superiority than the most rigid humility might allow. It is indeed not impossible that I may sometimes have laid down my opinion in a manner that showed a consciousness of my ability to maintain it, or interrupted the conversation when I saw its tendency, without suffering the speaker to waste his time in explaining his sentiments. And, indeed, I did indulge myself for 2 days in a custom of drumming with my fingers when the company began to lose themselves in absurdities, or to encroach upon subjects which I knew them unqualified to discuss. But I generally acted with great appearance of respect, even to those whose stupidity I pitied in my heart. Yet, notwithstanding this exemplary moderation, so universal is the dread of uncommon powers, and such the unwillingness of mankind to be made wiser, that I have now for some days found myself shunned by all my acquaintances. If I knock at a door, nobody is at home. If I enter a coffee house, I have the box to myself. I live in the town like a lion in his desert, or an eagle on his rock, too great for friendship or society, and condemned to solitude by unhappy elevation and dreaded ascendancy. Nor is my character only formidable to others, but burdensome to myself. I naturally love to talk without much thinking, to scatter my merriment at random, and to relax my thoughts with ludicrous remarks and fanciful images. But such is now the importance of my opinion that I am afraid to offer it, lest, by being established too hastily into a maxim, it should be the occasion of error to half the nation. And such is the expectation with which I am attended when I am going to speak, that I frequently pause to reflect whether I am about to utter what I am about to utter is worthy of myself. This, sir, is sufficiently miserable, but there are still greater calamities behind. You must have read in Pope and Swift how men of parts have had their closets rifled, with their cabinets broke open, at the instigation of piratical booksellers, for the profit of their works. And it is apparent that there are many prints now sold in the shops of men whom you cannot suspect of sitting for that purpose, and whose likeness must have been certainly stolen when their names made their faces vendible. These considerations at first put me on my guard, and I have, indeed, found sufficient reason for my caution, for I have discovered many people examining my countenance with a curiosity that showed their intention to draw it. I immediately left the house, but find the same behavior in another. Others may be persecuted, but I am haunted. I have good reason to believe that 11 painters are now dogging me, for they know that he who can get my face first will make his fortune. I often change my wig and wear my hat over my eyes, by which I hope somewhat to confound them, for you know it is not fair to sell my face without admitting me to share the profit. I am, however, not so much in pain for my face as for my papers, which I dare neither carry with me nor leave behind. I have indeed taken some measures for their preservation, having put them in an iron closet, and fixed a padlock upon my closet. I change my lodgings 5 times a week, and always remove at the dead of night. Thus I live, in consequence of having 2 great proofs of predominant genius in the solitude of a hermit, with the anxiety of a miser, and the caution of an outlaw, afraid to show my face lest it should be copied, afraid to speak lest I should injure my character, and to write lest my correspondents should publish my letters, always uneasy lest my servants should steal my papers for the sake of money, or my friends for that of the public. This is to soar above the rest of mankind. This it is to soar above the rest of mankind. And this representation I lay before you, that I may be informed how to divest myself of the laurels which are so cumbersome to the wearer, and descend to the enjoyment of that quiet from which I find a writer of the first class so fatally debarred. Miseries. I guess Johnson would recommend caution to consider what we wish for.